First of all, thank you so much for joining this meeting. I know that it's not the best hour because you know that at least in EMEA it's in the afternoon. So right now many people are leaving the jobs, but thank you so much for joining this meeting today. So this session is about Azure SQL Journey. Let's say that the main reason about the session is how is the daily routine on a cloud DBA. Okay, so we are going to talk about the main tasks that a DBA that is in the cloud is using the different services that we have, because we have several flavors. We'll do, let's say, day by day for their environment. With me, it's delivering this session. I have my colleague Alex Niku. He is a super escalation engineer in Microsoft. He's supporting right now Azure SQL Database and Managed Instance, working 2 years at Microsoft right now. And also it's a speaker in different events, and a former DBA and database developer for more than 8 years, most of them in the backend area. My name is Jose Manuel Jurado. I'm an escalation engineer. I'm supporting also Azure SQL Database and Managed Instance. I'm working for Microsoft for more than 11 years. And I support all the technologies, SQL Server, analysis services, and also I deliver some sessions, other events. And also I'm Microsoft certified trainer. So what is the schedule for today? So the main reason about this session, it's about what is the daily routine that a DBA needs to do every day. So for the reason, we create a special agenda. Let's say that, suppose that today is Friday in the morning. So the first hour, we are going to, not the first hour of the session, but the first hour in your timetable will be to choose the environment. We are going to give some tips and tricks about how to choose your environment. The next part of the session will be how to configure your high-availability. You know that by default, we have high-availability implemented in SQL Azure and Managed Instance, but we are going to add you or to show you several other options that we have in for high-availability. Other part of your day, for example, after, let's say, take a break, is to review and configure the backups. Okay, so of course, we have configured by default in Azure SQL Database and Managed Instance, but we are going to give some insights or what is other options in order to increase, let's say, the backup solution in your database. We are going to talk about also secure database. We are going to explain several details about what is the main topics that we have about to secure database. We are going to talk about logging and tracing of your database. Finally, in the last part of the day, we are most probably you are going to want to see or want to review how we monitor the performance based on the experience that we earn working in support cases when the customer call us and say, okay, I have a performance problem. So we are going to show you several techniques that we use in order to monitor the database. And I think that is the last part. I think that is it's very important because, for example, video asks one questions about the replication in Cosmos DB. So, for example, here, one thing that is very important for us, and it's one part of the DBA role, is to help others, to help the developers to create the most efficiency applications. So, of course, developers could create the applications. The application could be well, but will take some time because if it's not efficiency. So in this, we are going to talk several details. So we are going some tips and tricks about how the efficiency will be your application in order in connectivity and performance. Okay, but right now our DBA role will change a lot because right now I think that more than DBA, we are going to be a data engineer because at the end you are going to manage multiple technologies and multiple databases. So the first topic that we are going to talk is about choose your environment. So what is the flavor? What is the option that I need in order to choose for my database? Well, we have three different things that it's very important to review. Most probably you know this option. So if you want to have all the control of your instance, it's clear that you need to go to Azure VMs. This is clear, okay, because you are going to have the access to operating system, the SQL versions, patched, upgraded, etc. But if you want to maintain the control of the instance, and you want to have other details, but you don't want to have the OS level access, or you don't want to, for example, to remember to how to patch or patching your services, the best idea is to use or to select managed instance, because in managed instance, you are going to have the control of your instance, and also you are going to have several options that it's about the native restore, log shipping, SQL agent, etc. But if you don't want to have the control, you just only have one database, and there is no needed to have SQL agents, for example, or or basically it's just only to have one database running my queries, and that's all. In this case, you could use SQL Service. For example, if you want to SQL Azure, and it's clear that you cannot use SQL Agent, but we have some other alternatives like Runbooks that you could run some automatic process, okay? But in theory, technically, this is the first thing that you need to understand what is the best option for you, okay? So, but suppose that you choose SQL Managed Instance. Well, SQL Managed Instance, in theory, is the best choice when you want to have high compatibility with your SQL Server, okay? And to reduce the friction and the effort to move your data from SQL on-premises, for example, to Managed Instance. So in this case, when we are using Managed Instance, what happened with additional services that we have in SQL Server, like for example, integration services? Well, we have an alternative to use ADF, Azure Data Factory. Okay, Azure Data Factory, it's able to run not just only the process, the ETL process, plus you could run several SQL Server integration package. Other things that you could do is to run analysis services. For example, what happened with my service? Well, analysis services, we have analysis services as a platform as a services. You could connect and run the services like you run Azure SQL database. And finally, what happened with my reporting services? Well, you have two options: to create a virtual machine to run and install the reporting services, or to start using Power BI. Okay, so this is that one thing that we need to remember in terms of when you choose managed instance. What happens if I choose managed instance? What is the capability that I have, the service tiers that I have in order to for my instance? Remember that we are talking about instance. The maximum capacity, the maximum number of databases that could run in the same instance will be 100 right now. So for these 100 databases, you could choose several options. For example, you could choose a general purpose, or you could choose business critical. And after it, you could choose the hardware generation, and to choose what is the number of picors and the storage. In this part, I would like to put focus about more than the hardware generation. I would like to put more focus about what is the main difference between general purpose and business critical. Well, the main difference that we have using business critical is the I/O, the latency of I/O. If you need low latency, the best thing, the best choice is to use a business critical. Of course, you could change between business critical and general purpose, or choose general purpose and choose the number of picors. And the end, basically, when you change this one, we are going to allocate your SQL instance in another server with enough capacity, and most probably we need to switch on and switch off and switch on your SQL instance. Okay. Other options that we have, it's about high availability. So by default, the hierarchy that we have implemented in Azure SQL Database, and in this case, managed instance, we have some differentiation between if you choose general purpose or business critical. When you choose general purpose, the high ability is maintained at the storage level. So what that mean? That means that every time that you create one database, we are going to create 3 copies of the data at the storage level, okay? And it's something, and just only one single server. This single node will manage, will connect it or will attach it to this storage, and if something happens, let's say the server is not working well, or we need to run a failover process, directly we are going to switch off this server. We are going to switch on another server with the same characteristics and attach the storage. For the reason is very quickly this process. When you're using business critical, we are going to use one concept that you know right now. It's always on replicas. For this reason, you know that it's possible to connect to the replicas. That we have the concept that is called rate scale. So when you create a business critical, you are going to have another beside the primary. You are going to have 2 new secondaries that we are going to create for you. And if you change your connection string, adding the parameter application intent equal read only, automatically you are going to be redirected to the one of the 2 replicas that we have. Okay, this is the by default, but if I want to do more, so in this case you could add another option that is called auto failover group. So what that mean? That mean is distributed transparent failover group. So that means that you could create another server that you are going to run in a failover groups. Okay, so at the end is very similar that we have in terms of always on in terms of on premises. One thing that I would like to mention, it's about 2 things that we have a lot of questions from customers. It's about the maintenance plans and time zone. So of course, we need to update your server some time to time because we need to implement some changes, etc. So you could choose when you are going to have this process. Okay, for reason. Other option that we have is the time zone. That is, you could change the time zone that in order to specify what is the time zone that you want to have to database. So in terms of configuration, the backups, it's pretty much is the same. By default, you are going to have the backup rotation, but you could add more options. For example, if you want, what is the redundancy that you want to have in your database? If you want one locally, you want to have phone redundant or geo redundant. For example, if you choose geo redundant, that means that every backup that I am going to have will be automatically sent to the parent region. For example, you are in North Europe, your database is running in North Europe. Once we have this backup will automatically move to, for example, to West Europe. Of course, you could enable the long-term retention that this backup, for example, we could maintain this backup for more than 10 years. And of course, you could do 2 things more. Export the database using the backpack, or you could run a TIFF backup. So in the same manner that you have in on-premises, you could run this backup. What is the recommendations that we have in order to run the backups? Well, you have here the tips and tricks about it. For me, the most important thing is how much, for example, is the checksum and the MVC CheckDB. So when you restore a database and the restore process detect that this backup has not been run with checksum, we are going to run this one, and also we are going to run a CheckDB in order to review the consistency. So for the reason, when you want to restore a backup from on-premises to Azure, to manage instance, it's very important to use included checksum and CheckDB. We have some other recommendations, but that you could follow up in this part. So if you want to export the data, you want to run a backup from your managed instance, you want to have your backup. So you could run this process. So in this option, you could create your signature, and after it, you could run the backup. And it's very important to add with copy only. Why? Because by default, we are running the backups. And if you remove this option or you are not using this option, we are going to break the change, the log chains. So in terms of backups, when you are running backups and your database is a huge database, you could use compression, max try size, or to split the backup files in different locations. Okay, because we saw in several cases in support that depending on the size of the database, take more time or not. So other option that we have, sorry, I would like to mention just only one thing more. It's about restore backup from managed instance to on-premises. Right now, we receive a lot of questions that it could be possible to restore my backup that I did in a managed instance in on-premises. Right now, that is not possible. But I know that it's the most common question that we have right now from our customer, and I'm sure that most probably in the future, I don't know when, but most probably in this year, we are going to have this option already implemented. Other option that you have is, of course, is to run the export process. Okay, so other option that we have. So right now we have managed instance. What happens if I want to choose SQL database? Well, if I want to choose SQL database, I need to understand two things. If I want to run in a single mode or in an elastic pool. So when I want to run in a single mode means that we are going to have one single instance per database. So one database will run in just only one single instance. What happens if I want to use elastic pool? Elastic pool means that multiple databases that you choose will run in the same instance. So for this reason, you are going to save your cost because there is no needed to create multiple. There is no needed to run multiple instances at the same time. But one issue that you could have is depending if you have more workload in one database than other ones. You could be affected depending on the configuration that you have in your Elastic Pool. So in terms of service tiers, we have several service tiers that we could use in SQL Azure. For example, we have serverless. That is one option that you could pause your database and auto-scale. Auto-scale means that you could choose the maximum number of workers, the number of CPU, and you are going to pay for the number of CPU that you're using per second. Okay. Hyperscale, if you think that your database will take more than or will take up to 100 terabytes, you could use this hyperscale. Other option that you have is to use provisioning. And we have two flavors, to use vCore and choose general purpose and business critical. As I mentioned before, between general purpose and business critical, the main difference is about the I/O latency. We have other models based on the memory, based on several details, but it's not. I'm not going to explain this option. And also, we are going to use DTU. DTU is the first database tiers, service tiers that we have in the past. Okay, that is called data throughput unit. That means it's the number of operations that will run per second. So we have several details, but always the recommendation right now is to go to vCore because at the end, when you move your database from on-premises to SQL Azure, the idea is to, let's say, to have the same number of vCore for every database. As I mentioned before, what is the cons, let's say, that we have in Elastic Database Pool? Well, all databases running in the same instance. We have multiple databases, and it's very important. We don't have cross databases in the similar manner that we have in on-premises. Remember that you could run in your SQL instance, select database 2, DBO table 1 when you are connected to the database 1. In Azure SQL database, that is not possible. In managed instance, it's possible. But in Azure SQL database, not. But in this case, we have a workaround, let's say, an alternative that is called Elastic Queries. So this is the options that we have right now, depending on your needs in terms of Azure SQL database. I'm not going to throw this, just solely presented this as a reference for you. Other things is about as I mentioned before about serverless, it's very important to explain that in serverless, the minimum time that we are going to pause your database will be 1 hour. So in 1 hour, we didn't detect that you are not connected to your database. We are going to pause your database. During this period of time, until the first connections, we are not going to, let's say, to charge you in this part. Okay, and it's very important to mention one thing. Suppose that you choose minimal B cores and max B cores, as you can see. In this case, right now, this is my database. My database is choosing 4 B cores, and the minimum is 1. So, if depending on your workload, you are going to pay per second the maximum number of CPU that you are using per second. Okay, so if in this case, I'm going to pay just only 1 vCore, but if I need more workload, automatically you are going to use this more vCores, and you are going to use this, and also you are going to be charged about this number. For the reason we use about vCores build. So in terms of high availability, we have the same. By default, we have the same situation that we have, as I mentioned before, in terms of managed instance, but we could add something more. Okay, so it's right now thorn redundant that I am going to explain later. Also, we could use active georeplication. Active georeplication means that will be an asynchronous replication. So at the end, you could have other copies of the data in read-only mode in another regions. Okay, so as we mentioned that you need to run the failover in order to change the status from read-only to read-write. But the most important thing is in case that something happened in one database, you need to change your connection string. So in order to prevent the change the connection string, we have auto failover groups. That means that in the similar manner that we have in always on and always on, we are going to have a combination two servers in different regions running in always on group environment. So also you could use the both combinations. You could create failover groups, and also you could create georeplications and combine both for the same database. From the same database. So what is thorn redundant? Basically, this is the explanation. So when you choose thorn redundant in your database, we are going to locate your server, your node for this database in different zones of the region. So for example, suppose that I create one database and enable the thorn redundant. In this case, we are going to put one node in the zone number 1 that contains the different electricity, air conditioner, etc. Other replica in the zone 2, another replica in the zone 3. So at the end, if something happened in this zone, and then we are going to run the failover in another zone, so that we have any other different things in terms of capability, as I mentioned, in terms of electricity, etc. So right now also we have for the general purpose, you have an extra cost, but in this case, at the end, as I mentioned before, general purpose is based on the storage, and in this case, the thought is we are going to split, let's say, the storage in different zones. Okay, as you mentioned before, general storage, the high availability is implemented in terms of storage. So in terms of backups, we have the same. So by default, you have the retention of backup, and you could add more in the similar manner that we have with managed instance. So this is the typical things that we need to do in terms of backups, high availability, etc. But what happens if I want, for example, to secure my database? Well, by default, you have enabled TDE. the data encryption by default in your database. You could use TLS versions. Also, you have firewall, and also you could use private and public endpoint. So beside this, you could add other options like Azure Active Directory, SQL login, Windows Defender, always encrypted, in the same option that we have in on-premises. In terms of logging and tracing your database, well, at the end, you have more or less that we have in on-premises. And the end SQL Profiler, that is the first question that we received from the DBA. Where is SQL Profiler? Well, in SQL Profiler, you could use in managed instance, but also in SQL database that we don't have this, you could use SQL auditing. Other option that you could use is alerts when something happens in terms of CPU and diagnostic settings. That means that based on the errors on your database, timeout, performance issues, you could save all this data in a specific workspace that you, after using one tool that is called Custo, it's possible to retrieve the data. So in SQL managed instance, you have pretty much the same in terms of alert and in terms of diagnostic settings. So this is that as a DBA, you need to know when you are implementing or managed instance or SQL database. Okay, in terms of backup, in terms of viability, in terms of how to secure the database, etc. So we are in the right now how to monitor the performance. We reach more or less at the end of the day, and we want to review what happened with my database. Well, you have here multiple things about how it's possible to obtain data from monitoring. So as you can see, we have, it's going to deliver by the demo by my colleague Alex. We have several details that he's going to explain right now. Alex.
Okay, thank you, Jose. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, I would like to thank everyone that joined this meeting, and I hope that in the end, this meeting will help you to understand a little bit better about the products related to SQL Azure products, and as well to give you a little bit of a context and tips and hints about how to troubleshoot and how to take the right decision based on your business. Now, before I start, I'd like to ask if someone, based on what my colleague Jose presented, if someone have any questions. Yes, Jolly, please.
Yes, Jolly, please. Yeah, one question. So it's not directly related to what was discussed. Great session. Thanks for presenting. Is there, for my knowledge, there's no option to stop a SQL managed instance, right? So how do we go about doing that? Say for some reason we don't want to have the SQL managed instance running, say for cost saving purposes or something like that, right? Because the SQL Server has the serverless capability where it sort of reduces the load, right? So if you go for SQL managed instance and we have a higher vCode, but say we have off business hours wherein we don't have any transactions coming for a longer duration, but we will still be charged for it, right?
Yes, you are totally right. You are totally right in this question. Yes, right now there is not possible to stop. The only thing is try to reduce the number of vCores in order to reduce the cost. This question is very frequent question that we have. Most probably our product team will work on, and right now is working. I don't know exactly, but we'll work on it. But it's true, that is not possible to stop. Right? Yeah. Other things, Jolie, for example. It's if you want to have two managed instances, for example, in production. Another is, for example, for staging or or reproduction, etc. As far I know, we have several subscription types that the cost is something different. I don't know exactly all these details, but if you could send me an email in the detail of contact, I could send to you these details, because as far I know, depending on the subscription that you are using, you have some discounts. Also it's very important to remark other thing is when you create your managed instance, if you have the license, SQL license, or it's possible to reduce the cost, because I don't remember exactly, but you have this option in order to reduce the cost.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, we have gone for a 3-year reserved instance to reduce the cost. We also gone for a BOIL, bring your own license. So
Yeah.
we are trying to apply those two. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
We
other
also
idea.
write to you.
Yes, Julie. Other idea. Sorry, I have a lot of Ofeco. Other idea that I have is to use reservation. I don't know if you know this concept, but it seems that you are going to reserve the resources for several years. You are going to receive another discount.
Yeah, we are planning for a 3-year reservation to reduce the cost by 35%. Yeah.
Okay.
We already have BYOL, bring your own license. We are planning to implement the 3-year reserved units to reduce the cost. Yeah.
Okay. No, but it's very good question.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Okay, we should take this as a no. So again, what we are trying to do right now is just to present a brief demo about basic things when you are monitoring and troubleshooting performance in real time. So what we did to present you the big context from the beginning, we generated a performance stress on the database just to have some telemetry and some data to juggle with in this presentation in order to understand better what is our job as a DBA working from Microsoft and what can bring you some advantages joining this meeting and to understand what to do in a troubleshooting process. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so I was wondering, please let me know once you are able to see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we did, I have here, I tried to take from the very first beginning in order to show you what we are doing when troubleshooting and monitoring a performance issue. So I have this Azure SQL database. I'm selecting here. So first thing that we need to keep in mind when analyzing is to understand on which we have problem. So we have this Azure SQL database, which is a DTU-based model. As you probably know, the DTU, it's a blended unit measure between CPU percentage, data IO percentage, log IO percentage. CPU, we all know what CPU means. Log IO percentage is strictly related to the transactional log and implicit all of the DML statement like insert, update, delete, or merge. The data IO indicator is referring to the retrieving of the information like selects. And this can be, when you are reaching maximum in terms of data IO, can be outcome by missing indexes, outdated statistics, and so on. So first, you will have this, as you are able to see here on the compute utilization, I have the DTU, but for us, it is not enough because we understand it is a pressure on the database, but we don't understand exactly from where the pressure is coming. So what we need to do is just to select this graphic, just pretty simple, click on it. And we're gonna split the DTU in the 3 KPIs that it's aggregated with. So we have the possibility to add metric, a new metric, from here to select the CPU percentage. And it's very important that the aggregation should be maximum. We are not interested in the average because we are interested to see when we have spikes or the database is encounters some resource contention or do have bottlenecks to see exactly what is the real maximum value of the resource utilization that we have on the database. We are going to add new metric, and the metric should be data IO percentage. The aggregation as well should be maximum. And the last one will be log IO. In this situation, we have the big picture of what is happening on the database. So as you are able to see here, our problem, you see here a continuous spike of almost 100%, And if you are scrolling a little bit down, you have the label, and we can possibly see here that the problem is with the CPU. So we have 100% of the CPU. Now, I would like to add 2 more cents to this discussion. So, okay, understand we have the CPU 100%. Most probably we have a lot of the workload on the on request on the database, but we have scenarios where customers came and say like this. Yes, but I would like to understand, because starting from yesterday, my CPU is 100%, but we have maintenance tasks in place, like rebuild indexes, update statistics. We didn't change anything on the query. We didn't do absolutely nothing on the database, but starting from yesterday, my CPU is at 100%, but yesterday was 40%. What we need to do, and is very, very important, another KPI that needs to be analyzed are the workers percentage. Basically, a worker is the thread used by a query processing in the execution. So we can go here. You have the possibility either to add on this graphic or to specify a new chart here and add the workers percentage here. Again, the aggregation should be maximum. In this case, you have the possibility to correlate and compare to see if indeed customer was right. Didn't do anything, any modification on the database, but right now they have CPU consumption. And here, this is not our case, but I'm just trying to bring into attention that on multiple scenarios or multiple times, the CPU, as it is in this case, can be outcome by the fact that indeed there is an increase in the workload. So we can analyze and see, for example, I'm giving you a random example here. We have until 6 p.m. we have 30%, and afterwards there was a spike in 100%. We can see if indeed there is a problem with the workload, we can see an increase as well on the workers percentage. And then we can explain and say, okay, if you have a maintenance task, everything is up to date, you don't have the fragmented indexes, you don't have missing indexes, statistics are up to date, most probably it is because this current workload cannot be sustained by the service tires. So what you need to do is to increase the service tires, or if you don't know exactly how many DTU will you need in order to go further with your daily operational pattern in the workload, maybe an alternative, as my colleague Jose mentioned previously, is to switch to vCore based model. I just presented this because I'm starting from the beginning, and I presume that your account that have access and airbag roles on this subscription have the permission and it's authorized to access the telemetry and the metrics from the portal. Another thing that you can do after you have checked this, and you can correlate the information from the graphics with the information, you have on the left panel here, if you are able to scroll a little bit down, you have these features and options assured by Azure Portal. So if you are clicking, for example, on the query performance insight, on the query performance insight, we are able to see here, exactly as we saw on the compute utilization, an increase in the CPU. And if you are scrolling a little bit down, you will be able to see every query that was running in that specific timestamp, every query ID. And now what we can see here, we can see that, for example, we have this query ID that is 7007 that was consuming 6.51% of the CPU. But imagine that this query was executed in this period for about 12,000 times. Now multiply 12,000 times with this CPU and you will see that the CPU is staying at 100%. Again, this is a better way to see visually, not investigate into telemetry what is happening and what are the queries that are causing resource contention or bottlenecks and or so on. Again, we have another feature that is called automatic tuning. Now, the automatic tuning is pretty simple. It has 3 options: force plan, create index, and drop index. What does every option do? Force plan, for example, is the feature that the automatic tuning is using in order that the SQL optimizer is choosing to execute for every query the last good plan. So it's constructing, it's generating a plan, and every time we'll use that good plan. We know, everyone, we know that we can have plan regression due to query data store was disabled, parameter sniffing, statistics were updated, we're creating indexes. There are various reasons that a plan can change. In this situation, you have two possibilities. Even you are switching this option on the server level to on, and therefore every database that you have on the server will inherit when you have this option from the SQL server. Even if you don't have, let's suppose you don't want that to have this option set to on the database on the server level. So on the server level, you have set this option to off, and you can go on the database one by one and choose on off on the database level. In this situation, it will assure you that the option will not be available for every database that you are just for specific ones. The same it will happen and with create indexes and drop indexes. Now, for create indexes and drop indexes, this option are not interfering in your manually maintenance tasks. So let's suppose you have manually created indexes. Okay, indexes created based on the primary key, based on the non-cluster key. Index is created manually for you based on your workload. This option will only analyze, using an A from the behind, will analyze the workload, and it will create indexes when they will think that, okay, we can increase performance. But this is only regarding to automatic indexes. And as well, the drop indexes option, it's used to drop per a period of time. I don't recall exactly what is the period, but we can check and come back to you. For a period of time, if an index is not used. If an index is not used, they will drop it because it's not relevant. The index exists, not be used, and occupy space. So these are more or less what the option, these three options are doing from the backend. As well, we have here the performance recommendation. The performance recommendation will give you a real-time situation about the indexes that automatic tuning is creating or not. You have the possibility as well to switch create indexes to off, and you can see here the recommendation, and you have the possibility to validate for every recommendation what index should be created and what index should not be created, or to drop it. Now, what I explained right now, it's only based on the portal, but what it will happen if the user wants to troubleshoot or to monitor performance, but doesn't have permission or access to check them in the portal. Now we have again another alternative. One, it will be to use Management Studio, on which we'll get back really soon and discuss about this. Another alternative will be to use Azure Data Studio, on which after I will finish my demo, my colleague Jose will get back and present briefly how can you use Azure Data Studio with profile and so on. And another option will be you have the possibility to use Query Editor from here. Here you can specify either SQL Server Authentication, so login and password, either Azure Active Authentication. So you will be able to connect with three things: Query Editor, Azure Data Studio, or Management Studio. We choose Management Studio because it's the most complex, and it have almost all of the information that you need, troubleshoot and monitor performance in real time. So right now I'm gonna go into Management Studio. So this is the server that we have. We already connected using a SQL authentication. This is our database. Now, if you are able to see here, we have this folder. Very important. In order for you to be able to see this folder here, Query Store, you need to have the Query Store feature enabled on the database. This can be done usually with a T-SQL query. I will paste it in the chat to see exactly how it would be done. But in order for Query Store to be able to do performance optimization based on the plan that is cache or is not, or generate or choosing the goods plan, and to have telemetry to analyze performance and to monitor, you need to have this enabled. Now, the content of the folder, actually it's contain about 7 predefined reports. In our case, and based on our experience, what reports are you using the most? It's top resource consuming queries, query weight statistics, and track queries. For this situation that we are speaking right now with the CPU reaching 100, those three will be enough to understand and to make an idea about what query is doing, what is the problem, and how we can fix it. I will start with this. So I will start with query weight statistic. Before starting with query weight statistics, it is very important to understand about what weight statistics is meaning. I'll try to make a small parenthesis to this discussion and to explain a bit. So as you probably know, every query it's executing on a cycle, and the cycle is composed about three phases: running, suspended, and runnable. So what it will happen? Let's suppose you started a simple query, a select query, but your database is almost pressed to the maximum, to the CPU. The query is starting a select, let's suppose select 1000 rows from one table. It will start and it will get in the in a scenario where, okay, I don't have available threads to proceed further with the execution. So in this moment, the query will move to the suspended state. What does it mean, the suspended state? In this situation, the query will need a latch in order to access the data from the memory, but is not no thread is available to proceed further with the execution. So he needs to wait until another process will finish and he can acquire that resources in order to proceed again with the execution. What it will happen? When he will be getting again the thread available to proceed with the execution, he will move from the suspended state to the runnable state. What does it mean? When he will move to the runnable state, it will be like similar like a flag. Okay, I'm ready to proceed with the execution. When he will be flagged as, okay, I'm ready, I have the resources, I have everything I need in order to proceed with the execution, the query will move to the running, and so on and so forth multiple times. Every query is doing this cycle every time when you are starting the execution. Now, to get back to our story right now, because we started from this query weight statistic, this report from here will show you exactly what are the weight statistics on the database. The weight statistics can be parallelism, can be locking, can be source scheduler yield, can be preemptive request, and so on. There are multiple weight stats on the database, and this report will show exactly what is the weight stat preponderant on the database, and that is correlated to our issue. So I'm double clicking this report. Now, if you are able to see here, per example, our query, we saw in the portal that our query was CPU consumption. We can double validating here that the biggest weight stat on the database is CPU. We have two possibilities. Let's suppose that we don't have access in the portal. We have two possibilities to check the query ID, because the query ID is very important in order to take the query ID and to troubleshoot further with another report. So either we can go with the cursor here, and here we have information about weight category ID. What is the weight stat? It's CPU. And as you are able to see on the bottom, we have query IDs. 7007, 7575, and so on and so forth. Now, we are interested on the first one because we are analyzing in the same time with the total wait time millisecond that the query is waiting. So here we can see that the total wait stat is something around 4,600 seconds, so more than an hour. This query is summing overall the execution waiting for more than an hour to finish the execution. So we are interested in this query. If you don't want to use this report, the alternative, you can go in top resource consuming queries. And in top resource consuming queries, here we can see the query ID exactly and total duration, what happened, plan count, execution count, and so on. These two reports are perfect if you want to understand, because in this situation, we have just one query that is causing performance issue, but it can happen to have multiple queries. So you cannot analyze from the beginning specific queries. You need to check exactly what are the top consuming queries, what the queries are consuming. It's memory, it's data IO, it's CPU, and so on. And afterwards, take one query by another and analyze them. And in the end, we have this. For me, I'm using this report the most. It's called the tracked queries. So this report, it's used to analyze individual every query. What you need to do, we already saw that the query needed to be analyzed is 7007. We take this query ID, we copy paste it here. I'm going to type it down. Okay. And click here. Okay. Here we are able to see a little bit of information about the query. Before we will begin, I would like to show you something very important. Let's suppose you are not interested in the query for the whole day or the whole week or the whole month. You are just interested, okay, I had a problem today starting from 4 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. I don't need to see all of this. So you have the possibilities to go on the configure here. And on the configure here, you have this section that is called the time interval. On the time interval, you have the possibility to select last 12 hours, last day, last 2 days, last week, and so on. But as well, you have the possibility to select the custom. When you are selecting the custom here, you can specify, okay, I want it, let's suppose from today, starting from 4:00 p.m. until 7:00 p.m. It's not 7 my time, but it doesn't matter, it's okay. The most important thing that you need to do is to select from the statistic here, not the average, not the minimum, and the max, exactly as we did in the portal. Because we are interested to see for the query the maximum statistics, the maximum everything that can it's outcoming in this resource contention outcome. Okay, we can click apply. Okay. And now what we can see here, first we will analyze the first half of the top half of the graphic. So you are able to see here some circles and some squares. What does they represent? So when you see circles, in our case, we cannot see, I'm providing another specification. It can happen sometimes to see multiple circles and multiple numbers here. This is meaning that query has regression. So it's using multiple plans for execution. I'm not going to enter into details, but just for you to form an opinion about if you are able to see here multiple plans to know exactly what seems to be the issue. But we see as well a square. What does it mean, the square? As you are able to see, going with the cursor, it seems that this query was cancelled. This query was cancelled. When you see circles, you see that the query was completed, and you have a third option that it's a triangle, and the triangle is meaning that the query was aborted. What does it mean aborted? Command timeout. So query didn't finish due to various reasons. It was not canceled by manually by the user. It was aborted due to command timeout, connection threshold. I don't know, various reasons again. In this situation, we are seeing that one time the query was canceled and it was executed with the same plan. So we don't have plan regression. This is good. Now, we are getting on the bottom part of this graphic. As I was mentioned previously, it can happen that the query can have multiple plans. And we don't want this because this will achieve an optimal behavior and of course performance degradation. So we know that this 2328 is the last good plan and is the best plan for the queries, but it seems that sometimes it's using, let's suppose, 7000, another plan ID. We can force, using this option from here, we can force and unforce a plan. So for example, if I see that my query right now is using different plan than this one, what I need to do is to select this one and click force plan. If I don't want to use another plan, and I think that that plan is unoptimal because we can analyze it and usually we will see the plan much higher here based on the max waste stats, we can select it and unforce it. So you have as well the alternative to do it from inside the T-SQL query, but graphically you have the alternative to use query store and to do this modification from here. The last part of this one, and one more thing, if you want, okay, you search the query ID, you saw the query ID, but you would like to dig further and to check the query text. You have three options. Even you are clicking here on the view query, you are able to see here as well. And if you want more to open to a new query, you can click on this one and the query will be open here in a new tab of the SQL Management Studio. Now, here we have the execution plan. We know as a DBA, as a developer, when we are troubleshooting performance, most of the time the important thing is to analyze the execution plan. So here we have the possibility to see it. Now, I'm not going to enter in more details about how to troubleshoot an execution plan because I think we already are doing this and know, but what am I doing usually about this in basic line is try to analyze the execution plan starting from the right to the left and from the top to the bottom. And I'm taking a look on three important things. First, are the warnings on different steps. Second, for example, here, if I go with the cursor over the arrows, I can see that estimated number of rows is 1. This is a display estimated time. Now, if I see here a very large arrow, and now I'm just trying to retrieve, my query is just trying to retrieve just one row, it seems that there is a problem. So maybe it's missing indexes, it's outdated statistics, and so on, different factors. And the third one, usually, but this is not the case, I'm looking to see if it's if I can see a hash join. The hash join is the most, not all of the time, but usually I take a look on them just to see if something is wrong with the plan or it's unoptimal and so on. Now, on this specific reason, okay, we know the query ID, we analyze, we saw that it is stop consuming CPU. What we're gonna do next? In this situation, I'm going with the cursor over the warning here, and I can see that my problem is convert implicit. This is the query. Select count ID from performance where text to search equals these parameters. Okay, this is the query. What does it mean conversion implicit? Conversion implicit is meaning that most probably this query is executed from an application. Not necessary, but from an application. And the parameter, we are using variable. And the parameter and the format of the variable, it's defined as a higher format that the column used for filtering in the table. Per example, in our case, this variable is an nvarchar. But our column supposed to be filtered on, it's varchar. What it will happen? SQL from the backend will try to convert every information from the column of the table to an nvarchar in order that the comparison should take place. How we can solve this? Pretty simple. We are changing the variable to be on the same format as the table, as the column that exists on the table, in order that SQL should not do any convert, and the comparison should be one-to-one. In this situation, if you are going to do this modification, we will see here that this cluster index scan will switch to cluster index 6, which of course we know is the fastest. Now, this is basically how we are troubleshooting and monitoring using query data store. Now, let's suppose that even the query data store is not accessible. You don't have access, it is not enabled, you have a user that don't have permission to enable it, and so on. You have another alternative. You have the alternative to use extended events. Okay, we'll most probably all of us knows about extended events. It is pretty simple to define. Just right click on the session, new session wizard. Okay, sorry, give me a second. Click next here, give a test name. I'm not going to configure, just specify, okay, do not use a template. And here you have all of the KPIs that you're interested to. Even if you are analyzing a command timeout, if you are analyzing parallelism, automating tuning diagnostic error, here you have everything that you need in order to capture everything that is happening on the database. Actually, this is happening more or less similar like SQL Profiler. As my colleague mentioned, my colleague Jose mentioned previously, we have two flavors of the PaaS services. We have Azure SQL Database and we have Managed Instance. In Managed Instances, it's possible to use SQL Profiler. It's embedded. You can use it as similar as you are using on SQL Server on premises or SQL Server on VM. But in Azure SQL Database, it is not possible to use SQL Profiler in Management Studio. It is possible to use SQL Profiler on Azure Data Studio, on which soon my colleague Jose will present and it will show. But what you do for an Azure SQL Database, and let's suppose you have access on Management Studio, you are using this extended events. These extended events will capture information. You can see it on a table in database, or you can export the file as .xl file and see exactly what is happening on the database. More than this, if you don't want to similar like extended events, in basically it's using extending events, you have the possibility to go in the portal, and here on the database you have auditing. Okay. Fortunately, we have enabled auditing here. The information it's spilled on a storage account. On the storage account, every log that you are capturing using auditing will be stored again as .xal file, and you will be able even to import it on a database and analyze it, even to see from here, view audit logs. If you are clicking on the view audit logs here, just a second. Okay, here we have all of the traces from this log file. As well, you can click on the here and see exactly what was executed, when was executed, the client IP, the user that was connected, what is the event type, the server name, everything in order for you to understand and to have a big picture of the issue. So, to conclude, I just presented you in big lines the tools that you are using to monitor performance and that can help you to understand the behavior and to be able to take the right decision and to solve the performance issues in real time on your database. Now, this was my presentation. Thank you very much. And any questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, one question. Yeah, thanks for a great session. That was really useful. It's me again here, but one question. We are using Azure SQL MI like we discussed before, right? So there are two options that we see, right? Currently, we are using the monitoring, how you mentioned the query store, as well as we have the SSMS performance dashboard, or we have DMBs. But we also find the documentation mentioning something about SQL Insights and SQL Analytics, right? And both are in preview function. Could you give some guidance about which of these two we should use if you're using SQL MI, or a query store is good enough?
It's good enough, but unfortunately, I cannot connect to a managed instance. I think, Jose, can you please do a briefly presentation? Thank you very much. Yes, we will show right away.
Okay, thank you.
So, in based on your specific question, yes, when you're using SQL managed instance, as you mentioned, yes, we have right now in the reports, you have all the reports, more or less, all the reports that you could use in on premises, right? You could use a performance dashboard that is possible to know what happened in the database, or you could use the different reports about for different databases, etc. Yeah, you could use this one. Other option that you have, we have as Alex mentioned before, it's about extended event profiler. So if I run here and launch the sessions, also you could obtain what happened in my database or all databases that I have. So basically, I didn't have test all the options that we have in terms of dashboard, but at least I saw that all of them give the same information that we have about in on premises. Other things that let me 1 second about 1 second. Let me go to the portal. You are totally right in one thing. For example, in SQL managed instance, if I remember well, this is my managed instance. We have one thing here. 1 second is diagnostic settings. So in diagnostic settings, no, I don't have this, but let me go to the SQL. Is the same. 1 second. Let me go to the SQL server. 1 second. The server is this SQL database. This one. Okay. So we have diagnostic settings. When you enable the diagnostic settings, as you could see here, you could enable a lot of things that we don't have in on-premises, right? We have SQL Insights, events about automatic tuning, data about query runtime statistics, wait statistics, error, timeouts, blocking, blah, 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 blah. So we have a lot of information. So once we have this, you could save this data. One second. You could save this data in one thing that is called Log Analytics Workspace. When you have this workspace, you have here in the workspace summary, you could add several, let's say, plugins. In this case, I'm using SQL Action Analytics. That, for example, I don't have too much information much in managed instance, but you could use this one. In Azure SQL DB, right now you could see very good information about what happened with my database, right? We have how many errors that you have in your database, how many queries that you have per second, total time per wait type, total time for multiple things, right? So in this case, for example, if I have any error or any timeouts, for example, here, let's say, I don't know if we could do this one. Yeah. So at the end, you could see what happened in terms of my server, in terms of my databases, what happened in my query with statistics. So at the end, you could obtain what happened with the queries, the CPU, etc. So yeah, so at the end, you have a huge information what happened in your database beside the typical thing that we have in on-premises. Okay, you have this. Moreover, if you want, you could query directly this information. So we have one thing that is called Custo that contains all the information. All the information about different things. So sorry, I have a lot of echo. So at the end, this is the option that you have. So beside SQL Server, beside the reports, so I think that using this one, it's incredible the information that we have. Also, you could see the blockings, timeouts, whatever. So, and it's a very good information when you're using this one.
One more thing to add more
Yeah.
sense to this diagnostic settings as well. Let's suppose that you will not be able to monitor all the time everything. You have the possibility to set alerts based on deadlocks if you have connection timeouts and so on, based on the results from the diagnostic settings. So you can set alerts, say, okay, I have right now deadlockings, or I have blockings, or I have connection timeout. Let's try to check and investigate. So it will be a good way for you to be notified when these kind of things happen.
Yeah. No, it's this SAPS option is it's great for when you are working with SQL DB and managed instance. Okay. I don't know if this resolved your question.
Yeah, it pretty much answered. Thanks for that. Yeah, because
Okay.
we actually wanted to know whether we should enable this. Yeah, thank you.
No, it's very important. So we have many customers that are using diagnostic settings, and it's possible to, as I mentioned, enable all these options. Okay. So you have
And this,
multiple.
yeah, I'm just sorry to interrupt. This, I guess, is a part of SQL Analytics, right? If I understand, I think there's another
Yes.
offering for SQL Insights. I was just trying to understand what is the difference between the two.
Or Azure Monitor, yes, we have other options. Yes. Yes.
So I was just trying to understand which of the two should we select? Should we select SQL Insights or should we select this one?
Right now, I think that SQL Insight will be the replacement of analytics. I don't have too much information about it, but yes, because we are changing right now. I don't remember if the name is Azure Monitor or SQL Insight. But, sorry, Azure Insight. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. You're welcome. So the last thing, because we are run of time, other things that also, as Alex mentioned before, using ADS, we have a new plugin, or not a new, it's a plugin that we have that you could run LATS Profiler. So basically, when you run LATS Profiler, and then you could have, let's say, an extended event that you could see what happened in the database. This is the query that is causing the problem in terms of performance. And that's it. So I don't have to. We don't have too much time because I don't want to take more time from you about this in this presentation. But basically, I would like just only to finish about several things about to help others. As a DBA, it's very important when you are working in Azure in order to reduce the cost, because at the end, it's one thing that, or let's say, our boss and the customer wants to pay less to achieve more, is to help others as a DBA to help your colleagues, your developers, etc. So we have several recommendations. I don't want to take more time, but at the end, basically, the idea is we have in SQL when the developers say, okay, I have an error. It's very important to distinguish what is a connection timeout and execution timeout. Okay, the execution timeout is just only when you run the query, and connection timeout is when you reach the server. We add several characteristics here about several details about what it could be the characteristics about the connection timeout, and also we include several links that you could have some PowerShells that you could run in order to detect if you have a performance problem, what is the latency of the connection, etc. We are going to also to give this or to upload this PPT and the end. Other things, it's a command timeout. Okay, so at the end, basically, you need to when you have a case with or problem with developers, you need to mention that the command timeout is not specified by the SQL server, it's specified by the client. Okay, we have cases that our customers say, no, it's the default command timeout that we have in the server. Is not true. It's defined by the client, or a default value by the driver. Okay. We have also another self-help tool that is possible to identify some command timeout beside others. So this is the end of the presentation. Just only I would like to say thank you for attending this session, because I know that took more time than we expect. But thank you so much for your queries. But again, if you have any question, please send an email to us. Okay. More than happy to try to help in other queries and any query that you have. And I would like to suggest, if you have time, go to our Azure SQL database support blog or Azure Support Academy YouTube channel, that we have some videos that we explain this and other things. Again, I don't know if you have any other questions before dropping.
We have just one question.
Okay.
Can we have the recording of the session? I think that the recording will be put everywhere.
Yep.
No? Okay.
Yes. Also the slide.
The slide. Yes.
Yes. Also. Yeah. Okay. We are going to announce this when we have this information. Again, thank you so much, Alex. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for all the attendees, because I know that it's very late and in the afternoon, and it's Friday. Have a nice weekend. Thank you so much, and see you in the next time.
Thank you as well, guys.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Alex.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.